everyone. Welcome to Spiritism at Noon.
Mhm,
Today we are going to be studying from the book Good News.
mhm.
And as always, we are going to be reading the chapter. Each chapter brings a different subject, and then we will be comment on the subject. Okay?
Mhm.
So let me share the screen with you. All right. Jesus and the Precursor. After the famous presentation of Jesus to the religious scholars in the Temple of Jerusalem, Mary received a visit from Elizabeth and her son at her humble house in Nazareth. Following the usual greetings and a discussion about family matters, the two cousins turned the subject to their two sons, whose births had been preceded by singular events and surrounded by unusual circumstances. While the patriarch Joseph attended to the final needs of the day at his humble workshop, the two mothers occupied themselves with engaging conversation, affectionately exchanging their most intimate concerns as mothers. What astonishes me, said Elizabeth with a caressing smile, is John's temperament. Despite his young age, he's given to the most profound meditations. I often search for him at home in vain and always find him out among the wild figs or walking along the dusty road as if his little head were absorbed in serious thoughts. In my opinion, replied Mary, her eyes glowing more intensively, our two sons are the bearers of the divine light of a new pathway for humanity. My son is also like that, enveloping my heart in an atmosphere of constant concern. At times, I find him alone by the waters, at other times, in deep conversations with travelers on their way to Samaria or to the distant villages in the vicinity of the lake. I hear him speaking charitable words to washerwomen, to passers-by, to suffering beggars. He speaks of his communion with God with an eloquence that I have never heard in a speech by of our religious teachers. I constantly wonder what will become of him. Despite all the benefits of faith, stated Elizabeth with conviction. As mothers, our spirits are always being jolted by unreasonable fears. Okay, let us stop here now to comment about this passage. As we know, the Spirit Humberto de Campos in this book, Good News, he brings a lot of the uh, occurrences that happened during the time of Jesus, and he started really from the beginning, like last time we saw how was the situation in Rome, the Emperor Augustus, and how it was more propitious to the coming of Jesus. And now he goes straight to this phase where Jesus is already becoming an adolescent, and John, the son of Elizabeth, which and she is a cousin of Mary, is a bit older than Jesus. And so Elizabeth comes to visit Mary, bringing John. And of course, what mothers are going to be talking about, right? Once they don't see each other so much as talking about their sons, especially when we know who their sons are, right? We are talking about John the Baptist and Jesus. So we cannot imagine that just overnight they became what they were. It was something that they brought with them, and it was showing, well, even before they were born, because they were announced by angels, so to say, right, as elevated spirits through mediumship to announce their coming, and how much they would be talking with they would be actually representing God. So here they are, of course, still concerned because they are in their eyes, even if they are reaching, they are in adolescence, they are their children, and they worried about their way of being. Of course, this was not a normal behavior 2,000 years ago, and not even today, right? To have someone that is so collected and so different from what you see other children and children of their age. And so they are exchanging, information about the behaviors of each one of them. And at the same time, there are concerns because they know they came for a special mission. And everything always brings, the unknown, right? And to those mothers, Mary and Elizabeth, of course, they were worried about what was going to happen to them. And any questions or comments, anything that you would like to bring about? So by that, we can see that they were raised in a very ordinary environment, right? They had mothers who would attend for them, who would be worried about them, worried about their futures, who would be uh, 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 looking for, their needs and all of those things, and had a household where they could have chosen to act more like children, or ordinary children, but it was not in them exactly. And of course, every time we see a child that it does not conform to the standards of the time, we are going to be worried about it, because of course this is going to bring consequences, right? And most of the time this child may be relegated, may be just ignored, may even be bullied, right? So this is the concerns that they have. So let's read a little more. We were in Jerusalem just a few days ago, Mary is saying, for the usual celebrations and the ease of argumentation with which Jesus shed light on the questions that were put to him by the temple's religious teachers left us all apprehensive and bewildered. Um, Here she's referring to when they have to present their sons when they come of age to the temple, and the conversations that Jesus had with the religious teachers. His knowledge cannot be of this world. It comes from God, who is surely speaking through his pure lips. When Eleazar heard some of his answers, he called Joseph aside and warned him that the boy seemed to have been born for the downfall of many powerful individuals in Israel. As Elizabeth listened attentively, Mary proceeded with moist eyes after a brief pause. When Joseph told me about Eleazar's warning, I went to him and asked him to intercede for Jesus by using his valuable relationships with the temple authorities. I thought about how unprotected Jesus is as a child, and I feared for his future. Eleazar promised to take an interest in it. But then, when we were on our way back to Nazareth, my fears grew worse. I spoke with Joseph at length about him because I was worried about preparing him adequately for life. But the very next day, Jesus came to me in the morning and asked, Mother, what do you want from me? Have I not testified to my communion with the Father in heaven? I was really startled by this question, so I answered hesitantly, I just really care about you, my son. I feel that you need to be better prepared for life. But as if he were fully aware of what was in my heart, he said, Mother, all useful, generous preparation for living in the world is valuable, but I'm already with God. Even so, my Father wants us to exemplify what is good. So I shall choose the best school. Although he knew about the wonderful promises that the religious teachers had made to Joseph about him, that very same day, Jesus humbly asked Joseph if he could work with him. Since then, it is as if he was wanted to teach us that for God, the best school is that of the home and one's own self-effort. Mary concludes, he refines wood and shop with the hammer and adze, and enlivens our homes with his sweet joy. This is really so interesting when we think about it, when we see the clarity of Jesus from the beginning, in the way, in so many examples that we had, that when he talked to Mary, knowing that, his father, I'm talking about my father in heaven, knowing the origin, after all, of us all, right? We are all children of God. And first of all, we should submit to God's laws. If on earth we think about, the human laws, our parents' laws, okay, we have in the Ten Commandments, honor thy father and mother. So we are going to be doing that, because if we cannot even honor our father and mother from the material perspective, how can we honor God, right? So here, when he shows this clarity about his mission and his role in the world, and of course, Mary, a concerned mother, wanting him to, to do the or to reach the best that he could, and but also to be safe, of course. In this day that he went to the temple to be shown to the religious teachers, the teachers were very impressed with Jesus, and they talked to Joseph that perhaps they should prepare him to be there, to be in the school of the Pharisees and all that, and learn, to become one of them. But of course, we know that that was not the path for Jesus. And knowing and understand that at that point he had to engage himself with something, and it was very common for parents and children, one after the other, to follow the same profession, to learn the skills that the family had. And so he went to Joseph and started to work, asked to start working with him. And historical facts tell us that this is really probably what what Jesus did during this period of time that we do not have that much information. He was working side by side with his father for a great part of the time, and continue to do so for many years to come. Any questions or comments?
Look at this story now. After 2000, it's easy for us to understand, but I can imagine Mary as a mother, young child, asked to follow his own path. Then how difficult was for Mary to understand everything. Then probably she was prepared for this, to receive this. We imagine about this, but many times we are prepared before, but when happen in our life, we are not able to understand exactly the meaning of that situation. Need a little bit more about our feelings, our behavior. Then, as a mother, I imagine not easy for marriage in that moment.
Yeah, I mean, and sometimes, the fact that she was prepared and she received the advice that Jesus was going to be different, right? Like you said, it's one thing when you hear, it's another thing when you start seeing, and we can never be prepared enough, right? And I mean, and this, even if you were prepared, there is still the worry about knowing how things will go. For instance, an example, very silly again, but let's think when we are we receive orientation that a hurricane is coming in our direction. Okay, you prepare yourself as best as you can, but there will be surprise, and you will see that there will be things missing, or we can prepare for the worst not to happen, but there are things that are completely out of our control. In this case, of course, especially having heard what this religious Eleazar said, because of because of the fact that Jesus was so prolific in answering the religious teachers, that and by the way he was talking, that was a very difficult statements for them to hear. So of course she was even more worried. And I think this attitude from Jesus not only was what was common to do at that time. You reach a certain age, you engage in a school to learn a profession, and this is what he was doing with his father. But at the same time, to calm down his mother, and to say, and also to say, my place is here, my best preparation is here, and this is where I have to be for the coming years.
Even our days, every time when someone who knows profound one subject, if someone young start asking questions and then push them a little bit, it's not easy for the person who believe know everything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And imagining that 2,000 years ago, when
And
a
I mean,
small group
right.
supposed to know everything.
I mean, we can always control ourselves, but we can't control the circumstances and people, right? So there will always be surprises, right? So it's always going to be challenging, no matter what, no matter the dimension, right? So Elizabeth listened attentively to Mary's stories, and then, after other small material considerations, they both noticed that the first shadows of the evening were falling over the landscape, turning the cloudless sky gray. Joseph had closed up the wood shop and sought the serenity of his home. The two mothers looked at each other apprehensively, wondering where Jesus and John could have gone. So while they were there exchanging their worries and etc. and their surprise, time passed by. Jesus and John were no longer next to them. And so Humberto de Campos continues saying, its landscape being almost the most beautiful in all Galilee. Nazareth, perhaps the loveliest corner of Palestine. Its plain streets of stones, its little houses, and its peculiar shops are grouped together in a broad concavity on top of the mountains north of Esdraelon. Its horizons are narrow and uninteresting. However, those who climb farther up to where the highest shacks are located will be stunned by the most beautiful scenery. The sky seems to stretch out, covering everything in an infinite expanse. Mary and Elizabeth distinguished their sons side by side on a hilltop bathed in the last rays of the evening. From a distance, one would have the impression that Jesus' hair was fluttering in the caressing breezes from above. His small index finger pointed out to John the many landscapes off in the distance, like a mighty general explaining the details of his plans to a dependable soldier. Before his eyes were the mountains of Cernaria, Tel Megiddo, the heights of Gilboa, the slender profile of Tabor, later the site for the unforgettable moment of Jesus' transfiguration, the valley of the sacred river of Christianity, the safe heights, the Gulf of Calfa, and the lofty scenery of Pereira, a superb group of hills and valleys flanking the crystalline waters. We could know that their solitary, who could know what their solitary conversation entailed? Far removed in time, we might imagine that this was the first union between love and truth for the conquest of the world. We do know, however, that on the following morning, when the Precursor was living in the company of his loving mother, Elizabeth asked Jesus, "Won't you come with us?" And the young carpenter from Nazareth prophetically replied kindly, "John shall go out first." So now, I mean, and the way that Humberto de Campos describes the scenery, the small city of Nazareth and the surroundings, and they say that they found Jesus on top and John on top of this hill. In this case here, John is the precursor, right? The one that would be coming before Jesus, paving the way. And like he says here, who could know what they were talking about? But considering the conversation the mothers were having, we can have an idea. We can have a glimpse. They were not talking about trivial things. Either they were there, meditating, just, getting in touch with the higher forces of the universe and communing with God, or they were actually, discussing the laws like Jesus had done days before when he visited the temple. So here it shows that he had the knowledge, he had the understanding, he had the possibility of going beyond the written texts that we can find in the Torah. So we can only imagine what was happening, and even think that perhaps they didn't even need to exchange that many words. They understood each other. They knew deep inside, or not even so deep. They knew what they were here to do and what was their mission. And this is the reason why when Elizabeth, his aunt, said, "Oh, why don't you come with us?" He said, "No, John has to go first." So it came to a point where Jesus could no longer interfere. John had to follow his path. And as we know, a few of his disciples were actually disciples of John before, and they were hearing about the coming of the Messiah, the changes that needed to be done. And this is what really John, the precursor, John the Baptist, was doing during the years where Jesus is still waiting for the proper time to start his mission. Any comment or question?
I believe this is so beautiful how it is explained here that John the Baptist actually paved the way to Jesus. How he went out there and all that he had gone through was a lot of persecution and suffering later on, that it is amazing how God's will, how he planned all this. And surely at the end, when he protected him in his own way, John the Baptist, and how he went out there and spoke about Jesus, and they would actually think he was a crazed man. But you read this now and you see how clear it is, how our Father had this plan that Jesus was going to come, who was going to be our savior, and to help the world. This was a really, really extraordinary story when you really look into it and see how beautiful it played. And now you look back and say, my God, and to think that both mothers are there, that's even much more beautiful. How they spoke and understood in a way. It amazes me. It amazes me. And to understand what really went on with Jesus began his journey, I just think is beautiful. That's all.
Yeah, it's a really beautiful, really. And I mean, the more we go into the story, the more we understand. And I mean, this had to happen according to the scriptures, right? John had to come first. That was what we had at that time. That could be something different. And so let me continue reading. Some years later, we will find the Baptist fulfilling his glorious work of preparing the way for the truth, preceding the divine work of love, which the world would know in Jesus Christ. In fact, John did go out first to prepare the way for that grand endeavor. Clad in animal skins and living on wild honey, vigorously proclaiming the truth, and let himself be beheaded in testimony to it. he preceded Jesus' lessons of mercy and kind. And remember that Humberto de Campos said it was the encounter of love and truth, right? Of course, Jesus symbolizing love, the ultimate love, and in this case, John, truth, because he was proclaiming the truth, as it says here. And of course, we know that he was beheaded because he was denouncing all the wrongs that were being committed at that time. And we have to remember as well that as Jesus implied, because of the scripture saying that Elijah would come first, and he said to his disciples, he did come, but you didn't recognize him. Showing that it was John the Baptist. And if we know a little bit about the life of the prophet Elijah, and the liberation that he was working to happen, he committed some atrocities in destroying and seizing the prophets of Baal, that was not honoring the only God. And so he slaughtered them. And so this is a mark in the beheading of John the Baptist that also denotes some, making amends and restoration, renewing himself as well, being, giving his life in order to proclaim the truth, and at the same time to make amends for what he did when he was prophet Elijah. So the Master of Masters wanted to place the rough, straightforward figure of his prophet at the threshold of his glorious teachings, and that is why John the Baptist is one of the most beautiful of all the immortal symbols of Christianity. Salome, the one that required the beheading of John the Baptist because he was talking about her vulgar life, represents the futility of the world. Herod and his wife represent political conventionalism and self-interest. Sorry, as Herodias, the wife of Herod, that wanted the head of John the Baptist and used Salome to do that. So, but she was vain enough to be interested in this. And John was the truth, and in its works of perfection, truth rends and wounds, leading one to make extreme sacrifice. Yeah, we may say that we want to know the truth, but not every time, right? And there is always a way of saying things, and we have to pay attention how we are going to, inflict truth on others. Like the pain preceding the powerful manifestations of light in the core of one's heart, truth takes the plain block of marble and trims away its roughness, so that the labor of love may surface in its divine purity. John the Baptist was the voice crying out in the wilderness. As a laborer of the first hour, he is the unrefined symbol of the truth, which pulls up the strongest roots of the world, so that the kingdom of God may emerge in all hearts. Expressing the austere discipline that precedes the spontaneity of love, the struggle that banishes the shadows from the pathway, John is the first sign of industrious Christians battling with their inner imperfection in order to establish within themselves the sanctuary of their Christ-centered attainments. That is why Jesus said of him, among those who born of women, there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. This is quite a statement, right? coming from Jesus, we cannot contest that Jesus made it clear that he fulfilled his mission.
Yes.
Because, not being a pure spirit like Jesus, on the path, on the way of, becoming one, the world presents many temptations, many fears. He could have feared for his life, but he knew, and he knew that he could have perished, which what actually wind up happening. But he did not hesitate in doing what he was supposed to do. So he was paving the way. I think it's so beautiful, the way Umberto puts it here, saying like it was like a marble that he was, chiseling, removing the top layers so that it would be, the marble per se would be more ready or malleable to when Jesus would come with the words of love. So first we have to really be struck by that strong power of truth, of analyzing things. And the thing is, how can we relate that to today's uh, human beings? It's the same thing, like he says here. We, as spirits, we are this block of marble. And the first thing we have to do is to be able to see the truth of what we are, of the imperfections we still have, the lack of virtues, the virtues we still have, we already have, and what we can do to little by little chisel away all that is not necessary for us to become, the work that represents the work of God, and be really ready to embrace love as Jesus brought to us. Any comment or question? So let's continue. I think there is just that was it. That was it. Yeah, I thought that was. I think it's so incredible the way that Mr. Campos, Humberto Campos, brings all those stories to us. They are not just stories to entertain us or to make us, wonder whether they are true or not. I always like to remind everyone that this is in the archives of the higher planes of life. And he was invited by the Spirit Emmanuel to be able to consult these archives and get the stories that would be then transmitted to the medium Chico Xavier. So we shouldn't take those words for granted. And even if we may ask, oh, I wish he would bring more about, since he knows and he has access to the archives, why don't he brings the knowledge of the years that we don't know about Jesus? Well, it was not allowed so far. I guess maybe when people in general would respect more the works that comes from mediumship, especially, those so serious and committed mediums like, Chico and Divaldo, and of course others. Then we will understand that. We have to remember that Chico, one of his first works as a medium is called Parnassus from the Beyond, a selection of poems from different poets in a style and everything. And when it was released, there were many people that were contesting the veracity of the phenomena, even though experts on the subject and on the poets themselves analyzed the poems and said, listen, this is absolutely the style. And in order to write something like this, the person has to be an erudite, has to have knowledge. And Jesus had just, primary school, right? So 4 years of school, that's what he had. And it's still, people are not there yet. So we have to learn to think about those things, to learn about those things. And maybe when we will no longer be so skeptics in relation to that, we will be having more information. For the moment, he's enhancing what we already know, giving more details and putting in a way that we can actually analyze all things. Any comment or question?
Important is in this message is to know John prepare the soil for Jesus.
Mhm.
And as I feel today, Jesus prepare the soil for us to be here nowadays. Then I think this is the message I catch in this chapter. Wonderful, thank you.
Absolutely, that's absolutely right, Sonia. Thank you for us of that, because this is it, it's still preparing, it's still paving the way for us to do things. Okay, so we will end. Soraida, can you do the final prayer, please?
Yes, of course. And thank you again, Jusada. Beautiful lesson here.